The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait.
Mark England, welcome.
Brad Kearns, thanks for having me.
Uh, we are going to learn about the enlifted method, which is an extremely interesting, compelling. My initial reaction looking at the website is like, hey, now we're going to get in deep and put this missing piece together, especially in the coaching world, because we're all pretty well filled up with information, logistics, and then we wonder why we're not executing to the level that we dream about. We have things like words, story, and breath, as you propose on your website, are important. So I think maybe you can introduce yourself to the listeners and then get into this wonderful work that you're doing.
Happy to, Brad. My name's Mark England, and I'm currently calling in from the robust one-stoplight town. This is a fake Southern accent, even though I do have a little bit of a Southern accent. Yeah, I'm from Virginia. Both mom's side, dad's side, they're from Virginia too. Yeah, we got a family farm 10 minutes outside of a one-stoplight town, Dillwyn, Virginia, and a lot of the words and story and breath story started when I moved over to Thailand in 2002 to follow my dream of becoming a professional fighter.
Fighter? What kind of fighter?
Yeah, kickboxing and MMA.
Mm.
And so I wrestled in high school. That was cool enough. Took my first jiu-jitsu class in college in 1996, and that was way better. First time I got choked out in a class was the first class I went to. I didn't know what I was doing, and the guy put me in something. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to learn this." And that turned into me training hard for 6 years, and I had a
Mm.
handful of amateur MMA fights, and I won a couple of state kickboxing titles. And I said, "I'm moving to Thailand, everybody," and I did. I ended up living over there for 10 years, which still sounds strange to say, especially something for a country bumpkin to say. And the plan was to go over there for 1 year, Brad, and train and come back and go pro. That's very not what happened. Went over there and jacked my knee up for the second time, real good the second time,
Mm.
right? Had my second knee surgery. The doctor said, I remember it like it was yesterday, your career as a fighter is over. You could become a very good swimmer. And I, right. And I'm picturing laps next to grandma at the pool. Not what I had in mind in at 26 years old. And cheers. And darkness descended.
Mm.
And I entrenched an majorly inflamed victim mentality. So much so I didn't smile. I definitely didn't laugh. And I don't think I cracked a real smile for over a year until I got sick of that. And then went down to, so the first 5 years of me living in Thailand, I was an elementary school sports teacher at an international school. Great gig, love the kids, super fun. The second half, I was a coach / counselor at a cleansing resort. They did fasting programs for the second 5 years. And while I was doing the teaching thing and starting to work on my puckered up face, I was going down to this cleansing resort and doing these programs. It's great gig. I pay them a good amount of money to not eat. I get a yoga class and a coconut once a day, and they get my money. And I liked it. So anyway, my third trip down, I went to an emotional detoxification workshop. And I'm glad I went. Two, I snickered at the name, emotional detoxification. I went, and the gentleman that was running that workshop was a guy by the name of Barry Musgrave, who turned into my mentor in this work, unbeknownst to me at the time. And he talked about words, and he talked about stories, he talked about identities, and he talked about breathing. And he asked everybody, is anyone stuck on a story? Like, you got a story that, like, you're
Mm.
still, and this woman
Mm.
shot her hand up,
Wow.
and she had um it was a stinger of a bad breakup story. The short story is that her and her friend, she was in college, went to the beach, got a house, went to the beach. Her her boyfriend's, he and his friends got the house next door at the beach for beach week, add alcohol, press play. And he hooked up with her, one of her best friends, in front of everybody one night, and then dumped her in front of everybody the next night. She told more of the story, and that was the gist of it. And it, I mean, we can all, like, come on, man, that's some ouch. And he had her tell that story 3 times. First time, he didn't touch any of the language, any of the words.
Mm.
I'm going to talk more about language and words in the next hour. I'm going to do it a lot, for good reason. Second, and she told the story through. First time, angry, a lot of tears. Cool. Tell that same story again. So she gets into it, and he starts to make some adjustments with the words, and the thing loosens up.
Mm.
Now she's sad, no tears, and
Mm.
everybody's starting to lean in. This is getting interesting. Third time through, he knew what he was doing. He had her stop at the sentence that held the whole thing together. He did that to me. And he had her repeat it a few times so everybody's staring at the same sentence or spell. Webster's definition of a spell, not mine, is a word or a combination of words of great influence. And that
Mm.
combination of words was greatly influencing that woman since the day that it happened. He did that to me. And again, had her repeat it a few times so everybody's looking at the same sentence. And he goes, that last word, take out that last word, take out me and put in himself. Right. And you see, it was such a radical departure from the story that she had been relentlessly telling herself, that she said it in half of a sentence, it was clunky, and it went up at the end. He he did that to himself? It was a question, and then you see it catch. The breath came out. Sigh of relief, everybody, of pressure, and she let this breath out, and then it caught, and she goes, he did do that to himself. And then she started talking about he lost friends, it was
Mm.
actually worse for him in the end. And then the last thing she said before the whole thing was over was, he was actually kind of weird, that was never going to work out anyway. And I go, this is exactly what I did. I've fallen in love on sight a few times. I go, that. I pointed at it, not literally, and I was like, this, because I had that same sentence. He
Mm.
did that to me. He shouldn't have been kicking that hard. We were just
Mm.
warming up.
Mm.
And I did not know what the victim mentality was. I did not know the words that forces people to create it, whether they want to or not. And that was my first introduction to the whole world of getting our language working for us, because most people's language is working against us. So fast forward a number of trainings, that same spa, January 17th, 2007, I put my poster up with all the other coaches and facilitators at the spa that worked there. And that was the day that I turned pro. And I've been somewhere between full-time and overtime the whole time for the past 16 years, researching, coaching, and presenting on the power of words and stories. Just a couple of extra metrics. So who is this guy and why should I listen to him? I've been doing it for that many amount of years. This is my 332nd podcast that I've been on, talking about this one thing, which is the power of words. I'm
Mm.
the co-founder and head coach of Lifted, and I deliver all of the trainings for our certifications. I've certified 350 level 1 students so far. I've got a teaching background, and I've been in 3 documentaries. One's been published, 3 online courses. So like I get it. I've got some hours on the clock. And the work fascinates me. I love the people I meet through it. And I wake up, I'm very grateful for this
Mm.
field of study because it holds my attention. I was a horrible student in school because I
Mm.
was bored. This, on the
Mm.
other hand, I wake up and I'm like, cool, I get to go do this.
You've discovered your inspired purpose, as Dr. John D. Martini would say. That's freaking awesome, man.
Yep. I saw that guy for the first time in What the Bleep Do We Know
Mm.
in 2005. I watched that 16 times one summer.
Nice. Yeah, get it in there.
Hmm.
So you're focused on this stuff. You're focused. I
Yep.
love that.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and tell me what the organization does.
We certify coaches. Our main um, revenue stream, our the most of the amount of hours on the clock for us as an organization goes to certifying our coaches and developing the community and the brand. That's where almost all of my hours are. 99% of my professional hours are teaching class, going on podcasts, and attending the work meetings and such. So yeah, we are teachers. My business partner, he comes from I will use the word prestigious background in professional development and sales training. He was Jeffrey Gitomer's right hand man for 6 years. That guy wrote the best book, the most well sold book on sales. I think it's either Sales Bible or
Mm.
Little Red Book of Selling. And so we're both teachers in a very real sense, and we teach people about the power of their words, and it starts with the victim mentality.
Mm.
Yeah, so we paid a gentleman about 4 years ago to, the word is, scrape our social media, and which is they go in and look at all of our posts and everything, all the comments and everything. And he came back and he said, there are two things that people are most interested in listening to you all about. And the first one is the victim mentality. And then a very, very, very distant second is goal setting.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
why
very,
set
yeah,
goals if you're buried in victim mentality? What do the goals matter?
that's
Yeah.
a great point. I'd rather have goals than not. And when the victim mentality is entrenched, is inflamed, it makes going after the things that are interesting, important to us, um, make our life better that much harder.
Mm.
And that's the thing that trips people up, in my opinion, more than anything else with their goals, is the victim mentality. I'm very happy to recite the definition of that for the umpteenth time, and then break it down. Is that a good place to?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let me hear it.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a pen, I invite you to write this down, because I'm going to recite the definition of the victim mentality. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality, much less written it down. And when pen hits paper, so the numbers are 30, 50, 80. We remember 30% of what we hear, 50% of what we write, and 80% of what we teach. And if you put pen to paper, yep, you get 20% extra return on investment for listening to this show. I'll do it twice. So first time slow so you can write it, and then second time I'll elaborate on some of the key points of the victim mentality definition. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. I'll do that again a little faster. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends, underline that word, as it has to have a habitual thought process and attributions. at the end. What's an attribution? It's a characteristic. The main characteristic that we pay attention to is breathing. Most people's breath
Mm.
is trapped in their chest, and yeah, it's easy to take things personally when our breath is trapped in our chest. It's easy to um, see the worst in people when the breath is trapped in the chest. It's very hard. It's called amygdala hijacking. Look that up. It's very hard. Chest breathing turns people into horrible listeners, and it's super hard to feel comfortable in our skin when our breathing is trapped in our chest. And so the habitual thought process, the victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process. Habitual accurately implies duration and addiction, and then thought process. Thought process, thinking processes, also known as certain words used repetitively over time, forces you to stare at the victim villain mental imagery whether you want to or not, and regardless of how smart you are. It'll work. That'll work
Mm.
for me. It'll work for Einstein, as in he did that to me, or she never lets me think for myself, or I need them to respect me more. Really, do you need them to respect you more, or do you need you to respect you more?
Mm.
And when I know how to use my words, also known as thinking about our thinking, that's my favorite Alan Watts quote. When we learn to think about our thinking, we become
Mhm.
alive in a new way. And yeah, when we do that, we gift ourselves choice and more space and more clarity. And here's where it comes back to, is the baseline. We unlock our breathing.
Mm.
We unlock our breathing. Yeah, we're known as the language people, Brad. We might as well be known as the language and the breathing people. And gun to head, it's about the breath. Push comes to shove, it's about the breath. Like I'm there to help people with change some words and keep doing that until the breath resides down in the abdomen where it's supposed to. We're supposed to breathe abdominally,
Mhm.
parasympathetic state, most of the time. We're not designed to live well with in these chronic upregulated and psychologically inflamed states. What are you're jumping, what is that in the background? You're jumping over a are you a pole vaulter? Not a pole vaulter, it's a high jumper.
That's a high jump bar, sir. For those watching on YouTube, familiar with my logo plastered on the back wall, and there I am smiling. And what's my favorite hobby these days? It's a captivating athletic event, and I'm a victim of my genetics are for endurance athlete. That was what I did back when I was young. I was a professional competitor in triathlon. So now I do something that's completely, disparate from my life experience and my highest, genetic attributes. But it's so fun to try to get good at something that maybe I'm not naturally inclined to. And then I no longer have to inhabit the victim mentality because I'm gonna get better and better even as I age. I love it.
That's great. Yeah,
So I'm
that's
thinking,
yeah.
you
And
know,
what you thinking? I just rattled off all kinds of stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like a victim, someone inhabiting the victim mentality, is probably going to give you pushback, and they're going to deeply believe that they are indeed a victim, and you're wrong, and and so on and so forth. And then you could probably nod your head and say, well, if you believe so and you want to carry that, and I guess that's where that breaking point came with the woman reciting her story 3 times and choosing her words differently. But that probably takes a lot of convincing to many people who are trapped and stuck.
Until they write their words down. Until they write their words down and they start changing their words, with the help of someone who knows what they're doing.
Hmm.
And to get this on the table, there's a very big difference between victim blaming and victim mentality explaining. And we are firmly in the second camp, victim mentality explaining. And yeah, so life happens, things happen, and then they happen once. Just say they happen once, and then how
Mm.
many times do I replay that story in my head? So I'm saying I have no control over the story in my head, about the interpretation. Let's say it's a divorce when it happened when I was 7. Let's say I really got that interpretation spit spit shine clean. I nailed it the first time. I told myself a story about what it means that my dad's leaving, and how now I've got to, take responsibility, and I've got to make my mom happy. So because I'm the only one here now, and now I grow up with this story that I've got to, be there for everybody all the time. Is
mm,
that is that the kind of story somebody wants to play out? Because it's
mm,
common,
mm.
something along those lines. Very rarely do stories that that um, have a certain rhythm, cadence, and words to them, that trap the breath and force me to stare at a person in my imagination doing something to me. Very rarely does it work out well when I have to wait for that person in my imagination to change their behavior for me to relax and have a good life.
Mm,
That's called hell.
mm.
So yeah, we're about we're about going into the story and taking a look at it.
And why is the breath so integral to this process of exiting the victim mentality and I guess taking responsibility for your thoughts, behaviors, actions?
Yeah, um, because mechanically speaking, good luck changing your mind or your client's mind while the breath is trapped in the chest. So again, it's called amygdala hijack. When someone goes into a stressed state and the breath gets trapped in the chest, they get myopic in their
Hmm.
focus. And so they get myopic and fixated, and the pictures are up close and scary. And not only that, we lose, like I said, access to our um, listening abilities. We've all had a conversation with somebody who's been in an emotional state.
Mm,
How'd that go? We have language to describe that. It's like talking to a brick wall. And we also lose access to our creative faculties.
mm,
And we can observe that in storytelling. We can also observe that phenomenon. This, you'll relate to this, in movement. Go out there and run some wind sprints and tell me what your field of vision looks like.
mm.
Are you in an upregulated state? Yep. What are you able to see? That thing that you're focused on. I mean, are you able to think about other stuff real well and create it in like problem solving and stuff? No, it's singular and focus. Now, go out and go on a walk and slow down your rate of walking by about 30%. It's the magic number, oddly enough.
Mm,
It's called a stroll. Go on a stroll and watch how much extra space that you've got. Our man Charlie Chaplin knew this. He said, life viewed under a microscope is a tragedy, viewed
mm.
from afar is a comedy. I can keep going on the mechanics of story if you'd like me to in this conversation. Uh,
Sure.
yep. Most people keep their stories of ouch and pain and sting and woe, and the evidence that they use to um, convince themselves that they are a victim of circumstance up here in their head. Story kept up in the head, oddly enough, takes up a lot of space. It swirls. It's seemingly infinite. Where does it stop? Where does it start? There's the worst part again. Ouch. Story kept up in the head. The story is in your client. Your client is in the story. For the most part, it's subjective. It's still personal after all these years. One of the things that we do, it's as basic as you can get. And it's as basic as you can get when it comes to helping people change their mindset. And it's as basic as you can get with the enlifted method. We go in there and we help people get those specific memories of ouch and pain and sting and woe and title them out and write them out conversationally, erring on the side of more detail than less, with full sentences and punctuation. And yes, sometimes the pen can feel like it weighs 900 pounds. And that's I'll take a little bit of sting right now versus a few decades of bumping up into
Mm,
that thing. And once a story is is extracted out of its preferred environment, trust me, it wants to stay up there. It's just safe. It's at home, and it gets out on paper. Then you've externalized the story. You've given yourself some distance, and then you can start reading it and reading it slow and getting some breath in between the sentences. And then it gets a lot easier to change the words. So breath trapped in the chest, to come full circle, make it
Mm,
simple.
mhm,
Breath trapped in the chest, that's attachment to the story.
mhm,
It feels real. It
mhm,
feels true. Yes, that person did that to me.
mhm,
And that means this about my life, because it's not the story that gets us, buddy. It's the meaning that we assign to the story.
mm.
And breath opens up, and they start to let go of this death grip on the meaning. Look, the same thing. He did that to me. No, he did that to himself. That guy was actually really weird. Thank God I'm not with him. She was
Mm,
not thinking that 10 minutes before.
mm.
He was a victim of life.
So I guess when you get someone going and relating their victim story, for example, they're going to transition into shallow, panting, sympathetic tone because they're asked to relate their victim story, and that's where the trap occurs, where they can't really have personal growth because they're too stressed and too myopic to see a bigger picture until they're facilitated, as you relate in the account of the girl retelling the story and checking the words.
You just said that better than I did. Yeah, until you go into the story, it's really hard to get out of the story. The way forward is
Mm,
in. Oddly, the way forward is in. I know of no other way. I wish there was an easier way, because sometimes that's really tough to go into those things. I wish there was an
yeah.
easier way than to go back in there. But here's it's like a spicy Thai dish. I lived in Thailand for 10 years. I ate some really spicy dishes. It's like a spicy Thai dish. The story burns going in,
Mm,
it smolders while it's in there, and then it burns coming out. And if you have no
mm,
idea what I'm talking about, everybody, go eat a spicy Thai dish and message me in 48 hours, assuming everything is working as it should. And that's why, part of the reason why people can and tend to avoid revisiting those stories in details, because the devil is in the details. The more detailed we get in our recount of an event, the more we feel. And if someone doesn't know how to get that feeling all the way through, get it, spicy Thai dish, then it's just burning bad again.
mm. I wonder if there's another level here where we have the clear examples of a victim circumstance, victim story, like the girl related at spring break. But then there's also, like Cynthia Thurlow talks about, big T trauma and little T trauma. So I'm thinking of, my personal background. I don't have a ready-made extreme victim story to relate where somebody kicked me too hard and busted up my knee, but perhaps I'm not even consciously aware of certain victim stories or an accumulation of victim stories that are compromising my life and holding me back because they're sort of an amalgam, or they're just underneath the surface of my conscious memory. But maybe there's a repeating pattern where it's like the why me? Why do I always find myself you know in in the runner-up position when I want to win, or whatever it is? And then I have to even identify the victim story, I guess, is my question.
Yep, that's it's common and it's easy to check.
Oh.
And what do I mean by easy to check? Um, so let's say someone has, and this is most, I'm speaking to people as if they're coaches, and if they're not, this is a pretty easy thing to relate to, whether it's personally or you've seen other people deal with patterns and themes in their adult life. Let's pick
Mm,
one that I worked with very recently. This gentleman, he was struggling at work with imposter syndrome, especially when it came to giving meetings or facilitating meetings in front of his peers. And
mm,
he said the same thing happened every time, is that he would get up there and he would have these they weren't like full-blown panic attacks, like shut the whole system down, but it was taking up some space. these feelings of being an imposter and being not good enough. And it had been happening all throughout his professional life. Okay, great. That's the theme. That's what he told me he wanted to have work on. And I said, can you give me an example of that? And he said, that's easy. It happened 2 weeks ago. And he told me the specific, we got to write it down, title a specific story, the specific story that happened 2 weeks ago, and write it out on paper, which is very rare to do. You want to write it conversationally, like it's going in a book.
Mm.
And so he read through that story. And you know what happened, Brad? Those feelings got stronger, which normally happen. Okay. It's a good thing. And then I asked him, when was the first time you felt that pressure in your chest of not being good enough, of being an imposter, and being scared of judgment? He goes, oh, that I was bullied all through middle school.
Mm.
And um and he goes, I haven't thought about that in years. Well, why would you? Because you're dealing with the outside layer of the adult onion at work. And very rarely do people get into the story deep enough to make those connects back to the stuff that happened in childhood and adolescence. And I asked him, I was like, let me guess. You remember the worst event, the worst bullying event? He goes, yeah, I definitely do. And he hadn't titled that. He hadn't written it down. It had just been in
Mm.
there smoldering, like I said. And we got it was the three most prominent bullying events, got them from up here and titled and written out conversationally, and then put them through what we call in the Enlifted method, the 4-step process, which is exactly what I said a second ago. Title it, write it out conversationally, read it, whatever you feel is correct. Read it slow, 70% of your normal rate of speed when someone slows down their rate of speech, the breath starts to unlock. Trust me, you want that. And then read it again, slowish, with a breath at the end of each sentence.
Mm.
And what that does is it gets the breath to descend down into the abdomen. And so this is good for your YouTube people. Again, this is the mechanics of story, everybody. This is not about the why, this is the how. So story kept in the head, breath trapped in the chest, face.
He's covering
Wherever,
his face with a comp book right now, people.
yep. Wherever you look, there it is. Get the story written out, air it out, and as the breath descends, the picture moves away.
Mm.
And so now I go into the observer as opposed to the relentless participant. And what people are most haunted by when they say, well, I'm a victim of the thing, it's the relentless participation in the story. It's not the thing because did it happen today? That thing that happened 20 years ago, did that happen today, externally or internally? No. I watched that movie again in my head. And that's the thing I want to stop. Yeah, we can't go back there 20 years ago. But guess what? We can turn the volume down on this thing that happened this morning again in your mind.
So you had the steps were to title it, read it slowly, 70%, reread it with breaths in between each sentence, and then it was a 4-step. What's the?
Yep. You got 1, 3, and 4. Step 1, which is good. Most people have no steps. And so what happens, they just do their best not to bump up into those stories and those feelings, even though they keep bumping up into those stories in some form or fashion. And those feelings, like the guy I mentioned who was at work and just kept, every time he was dealing with that for 20 years. That's
Yeah.
the real, that's what I was talking about. That's the real scary stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to deal with this for 50 years and it's going to get majorly in the way of my professional career, as opposed to going in and writing those stories out.
So
Yeah,
Mark,
so
are you contending that this guy being bullied in middle school and not properly processing those memories was a direct and really strong driver of his imposter syndrome in the conference room?
I'm saying that definitively.
Wow. And I mean, we hear this now. It seems like a recurring theme from behavior experts, psychotherapy, that we have these unprocessed childhood traumas, and then they play out for the rest of our lives until we kind of acknowledge them, process through them, and then they lose their power. Is that a good generalization to bring some of these ideas together?
You just said it as good, if not better than I did. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Talking about going in there, talking about going in there with a specific tool, which is like the four steps, everybody. Title it, write it out conversationally. Don't write about it, write out in detail what happened.
Yeah.
Step two, read the story. Let yourself have the feel. Okay. People are meant to feel feelings. It's trust me, it's okay, especially when it's on the way out. And then step three, read the story at 70% of your normal rate of speech. That's going to loosen up your breathing. And then step four, get a breath in between, as in a full breath, as in a in between each sentence,
Hmm.
and you're going to zoom out.
Okay, so if I'm in your workshop right now and we have the next 20 minutes to go and write down our story, and let's say, hypothetically speaking, I kind of draw a little bit of a blank because I don't have this profound memory of extreme bullying in middle school. Of course, I can probably come up with a list of 20 little t traumas. I was too shy to talk to the girls in high school. I felt marginalized as an athlete because I wasn't as good as I wanted to be, whatever it was that kind of made me shrink into a corner. And I have, I can recite some of these different snapshots from past life. Would this qualify? 20 little T traumas, and go head up with someone who suffered a violence at the hand of others, or something that is really extreme and something easy to pinpoint.
For sure. Um, First things first, play at your own level. I've given somewhere around 750 workshops, and it's always play at your own level. If somebody wants to go in there, cool. I'll go in there with you. If somebody doesn't want to go in there, I don't want to go in there either. And if you don't have a story, fantastic, great, excellent. And I'm not sure what the difference between a little T trauma and a big T trauma is, and
Right.
what the definitive line is, because I've seen some seemingly minor stories create some extremely negative emotional reactions and patterns in
Hmm.
people, because a lot of that's up to opinion, right?
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
here's another piece of that answer, is that it doesn't matter. You can four step procrastinations, and you can four step, because it doesn't matter what the
Mm.
context is. It's not context dependent. It doesn't, it only works for divorces and dog attacks. No, it works for any story that bothers you.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I've been challenged or scolded here when I utter up a positive spin, and it's like, well, you're diminishing your own suffering by saying, comparatively speaking, I haven't had any terrible traumas to complain about, but in in itself could be a coping mechanism that's keeping me trapped in a certain victim position, I suppose.
Yeah, and my question to that is, how do you feel about yourself?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, like, I
do you
don't
feel do
matter
you feel good
enough
about
to.
yourself? Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. No one
yeah.
will ever really love me. I've got that whole thing going on, and that idea and that feeling, but nothing ever really tragic has happened. Let's tell. Would you like to get rid of that feeling of not being good enough? It's a telephobia, folks. That's what 95% of this stuff boils down to, a telephobia. Yeah, there's a word for it. It's the fear of not being good enough. And why does it have to be, it's yeah, it's it, I didn't need a PhD to create the story of not being good enough when I was 9. I don't need a PhD to change it. And I also don't need a PhD to analyze how much it bothers me. It bothers
Yeah,
me. That's all I need to know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, let's grow up a little bit here, people.
So speaking of that, I wonder if, um, do you ever run afoul of the world of traditional uh, psychotherapy and counseling where are there any objections to where this stuff can be someone might consider it harmful or off point, or does it go synchronize hand in hand with someone who is a big consumer of traditional models that are in the mental health world?
Yeah. It's uh, uh, at the end of the day, choose your path. My advice is to shop around and get a second and third opinion. I've never met anybody who said, I really wish I never got that second opinion. I mean, really. And as far as traditional psychotherapy and psychiatry goes, like clinical psychiatry, like cognitive, those people are on a different level than I am. I've got an IQ of 9. I come from a very blue collar background. I have a handful of MMA fights. I wanted to be a professional fighter, and I was an elementary school sports teacher. Okay, before I got into personal development. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. If you're looking for someone who's got a very well, like I said, if you're looking for Einstein in this world, I'm not that. I'm just someone who stares at words and how they influence people.
So the the words themselves, you're placing great importance on that. I'm going to also ask further
Yeah,
about the breath, but
yeah.
um, I'm thinking of like day to day examples of, oh, I'm so spacey. I'm sorry I'm late for our podcast. It was 15 minutes ago. Gosh, I'm such a dork. I kept you waiting. And so
We
these
were both
types
right on
of
time, by the way. I
I
like
know
that.
it's a miracle for me. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, here I am cranking. But when we engage in that self-deprecating language, it's kind of like the imposter syndrome person who's in his head is doesn't feel qualified. But a lot of times we
Sure.
verbalize our lack of abilities, and then I guess we manifest those because we're using those words in a patterned manner.
Yeah. Most people's language, and when I refer to language, I mean internal dialogue and external dialogue. What we think, what we say, what we write is very patterned. And people, it's the easiest thing to overlook, Brett. It really is,
To
because it's
overlook,
yeah, for sure,
yeah,
because
to
it's
overlook.
it's it's right between, it's right under our nose, what we say. It's right between our ears, the voice in our own head, and it's right at the end of our fingertips. It's what we write. And here's an interesting thing to think about, or here's a position that I take, is that most people's problems, which they would define as super big and complicated, they think the answer has to be as big and complicated. And I'm here to say no. It's almost exclusively the opposite. First things first, let's get that thing written down on paper so we can look into it. So it's a lot easier. The fastest way that I know to slow down a story is to write it down.
Mm,
And and that's really where the rubber meets the road. Here's a brand analogy for, very rarely does a car mechanic take a car out to the highway and at 70 miles an hour start popping the hood, pop the hood and start changing out parts. It's the same thing for our story. We got to park that thing. We got to park that thing so we can start taking out words and seeing what is what. And oh, wait a minute, my dad leaving when I was 7, that wasn't about me. That was about him. Do I want at 47 my dad leaving when I was 7 was all because of me? I wasn't a good enough son. If I'm thinking that I'm not a good enough son, so much so that my dad leaves the house, then I'm going to have this not good enough thing chasing me around the rest of my life. Very scary. Very scary. And very rarely is that kind of story gotten on paper. And we're not talking about writing about it, journaling about it, or journal, like writing it out to and allowing myself to believe the story. Okay,
mhm.
that's what most journaling is. I don't recommend that because now it can be good, And a lot of times it's either neutral or a net negative, because now I've got the proof in writing. I've got it in writing. No, no,
Mhm.
write so you can think about your thinking. Write so you can look at the story as opposed to observe the story, as opposed to believe the story more strongly. And did I come close to answering your question on that about the language patterns of people?
Yeah, I guess even writing the story, you wanna be, mindful that you're not putting in all these, adjectives, right? Where, just like the lady telling the story about spring break, and then this uncaring asshole went and hit up on my friend. Like, you gotta just write the story in a as factual a manner as possible, I would assume.
That's coming. What you want to do is to write it as as you as it was when it first happened,
Mhm,
because that's your draft. And then you can go in and change some words and have a second draft and a third draft. Okay. Most people don't even have a draft to hand in, pen to paper. So you'll get to the elaboration of the story, or the editing the story, once you get through the emotions and feelings. Okay, that's the normal progression. It's not always, and it's the normal progression, because the more emotional someone is about a story, the more attached they are to how the words are put together.
mm,
And what you want to do is you want to down regulate their nervous system in context to the story, so then they've got some space and clarity and are less attached to
mhm,
the story.
mhm, mhm. So, with the breathing, I wonder if you're familiar with the popular book Oxygen Advantage, Patrick McEwen, and it was an insight to me. I've known about the relationship between nasal diaphragmatic breathing and parasympathetic function, and how you want to use the entire diaphragm and take these nice breaths. But he also argues for minimizing your breathing at all times, taking the minimal amount of oxygen necessary. And I wonder if that's flowing into your training at all, or if you have any insights on that.
That's the first I've heard of that. Um, how I breathe. So I had somebody, one of Paul Check's friends, interviewed me a few weeks ago, and they said, "So what has this stuff done for you?" And I thought, "Thank you for asking." And I said, "It's unlocked my breathing.
Mm,
It's unlocked my breathing." I can go on in detail about other things it's done, and that's irrelevant in one sense. Okay, for me, because yeah, I very clearly remember I tanked my fight career with bad breathing mechanics.
mm,
I ended my fight career with a victim story, which was why I was training so hard. I was going to prove to everybody that
mm,
I was good enough, and I was not scared. I wasn't that scared little boy on the playground from elementary school, because I had a couple of stories of fights breaking out and me running
mm,
away and me beating myself up for all those years.
mm,
And then it gets me into the fight game, and that was my main thing. And so, I was already mad internally, and I go in and I'm training with these stories running in my head, breath trapped in the chest. Things are gonna break. Like, uh, uh, my buddy Brian Jones from the Brian Jones Rock and Roll Revival, deep, deep meditator, long time deep meditator. He said, we're having these conversations because we do, and he said, "Well, it doesn't matter what it is. If you hold your breath, you're going to hurt yourself.
mm,
Whether it's kung fu fighting, whether it's go out on a date and hold your breath. Tell me how that goes. Get up in front of a group of colleagues and give a presentation about something that
mhm,
you could be a world expert in, and hold your breath and tell me how that goes. Get on a sales call, hold your breath, tell me how that goes. It's like, go on vacation with your family and hold your breath. And you're like, oh, yeah. And tell me how that goes. So we're still on the conversation about minimal oxygen. Uh, I'm way more interested in about how smooth my breathing is.
mhm,
I like smooth inhalations and smooth exhalations, because my breath used to be very staticky and spiky. It's like,
mm, mm,
because my story was really staticky and spiky. It had all these thorns and broken glass in there, and every time I bump up against it, it was like, ow. and then I'd
Mm.
blame somebody out in my life. See, obviously, folks, I'm I'm using some seriously basic analogy uh,
Mhm.
to this stuff. Yeah. So if you need more, if you need credentialed experts in this, go listen to Jordan Peterson. Okay, go listen to Jordan Peterson and overlap what we're saying with him, because he's had this. He's the smart guy talking about this stuff. We're the basic people, or at least I am. My
Yeah.
business
He has a
partners as well.
whole, workshop. There's a website you can go to where he has you, engage in a deep writing exercise.
Yeah,
I
know
believe
thyself. We've
getting
all done
into
it.
your yeah, you know about that? Like, what's he's wanting
Oh,
you
we've
to
all done it. Yeah, it's called Know
your
Thyself.
oh, know
And
thyself. That's
Know
right. Yeah.
Thyself. Yeah, all of our team members and contractors have done that. So we know where to place them for them to succeed and
Mm.
play on their strengths,
Mhm.
and all the other cool stuff that you learn in there, because he is a high level clinical psychologist, and he's, in my opinion, telling the truth to people about
Mhm.
what they can do with their life and their story. Yeah.
So
And we have a
when
breath work coach. So Wim
mm,
Hof got a I went to middle school with the guy. Lucky me. He's a second degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, owns his own school, and he's one of a handful of level 3 Wim Hof instructors
mm,
in North America. Are you familiar with Wim Hof?
sure.
Wim Hof method? Yeah. Um, and so he and I have done at least 15 workshops together, pairing up doing the story work, and then going in and breathing at the second half. It's like starting a car that hasn't been started in a while. It just blows all this stuff out of people, and
Mm,
they leave like, oh, thank you. And he's the
mm,
breathwork coach for the Enlifted community. He does a quarterly breathwork workshop for everybody, because we talk about that a lot. Low and slow breathing. Get
mhm,
your breath low and slow when you're coaching people, and watch what happens.
mm. So when one is, taking the training, the Enlifted method program, is it often you're working with people who are in a coaching role, like personal trainers and life coaches, and people that are then going to help take their clients to the next level, or is it an individual consumer or a mix, or who's attractive for this?
Good question. roughly 65% of our coaches are from the fitness industry.
Wow.
Another 15% are from the nutrition space. And we have a smattering of life coaches and other different people that exclusively coach men, exclusively coach women. We even have a singing coach. And then there's about 10% of people that come in that don't want to coach per se. They just want to get better with their words and their stories,
Mm,
and like their parents, and they want to help their kids with it when it's time, which is very cool. Yeah, we went on a in 2017, January 20th, 2017. I flew from Thailand to Los Angeles to do a podcast. And it was, at the time, the most popular podcast in the fitness and CrossFit space. It was called Barbell Shrugged. And I told my business partner, I was like, man, if we can get this conversation in front of the fitness folks, um, it'll catch. And we did. It's a good story about how we did, and I'll skip it. And so when that show dropped, we got introduced to the fitness industry by the best mouthpiece in the game at the time. And things have changed. Things have been different since. It was one of those before and after moments. That
mm,
was the very first. And we were on fumes for years, man.
mm.
So I get it. I get that too. Um, and that's why 65% of our coaches come from the fitness industry. Yeah.
So, specifically with fitness oriented goals and that
Mhm.
coach client relationship, where there's so much practical instruction and guidance being dispensed, but a lot of times the main goal of like losing excess body fat or achieving a competitive goal, uh, I would assume that the story gets quite a bit in the way to the extent that the other stuff's just not going to stick until we get to the root of the problem and unlock that. So then the potential is actually allowed to unfold.
You're right. You're right. Usually that's the thing that makes or breaks people. We have, I don't know, 35 people in the community that have gyms.
Mm.
And I ask them, how many times have you seen somebody walk in the gym with all the physical talent in the world and they just choke it up? Like, it happens way more than it doesn't. And and yes, so having the ability to go into your client's story only if you want that ability, right? Only if you
Mm.
want that ability, is another way that you can add value to the client and coach interaction. There are some people in the fitness space or any space that are like, I want nothing to do with my client's emotions and feelings. And my reply to that is, yeah, I get it. And there
Mm.
are people that say, yeah, I do want to go in there and work with people at that level. And I say the exact same thing in the exact same way. Yeah, I get it.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's play at your own level. If somebody wants to go in there, cool. If they don't, that's cool too. Um, yeah, I don't know what people need to think, nor would I want to know what people need to think. That'd be weird. That'd be weird on both sides of that
Mm.
street.
Mm.
All I'm there to do is help people think about their thinking
Mm.
and learn about how their words are influencing them for better and for worse. And if someone wants a victim story about God knows what, go for it. It's your story. I can light that thing up, man. Go for it.
Yeah, don't judge it.
Um,
It's
no,
okay. Go ahead.
yeah,
Stay there if you want.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I was if somebody had told me this stuff back when I first got introduced to it, I've been like, dude, you can go ahead and leave me alone.
Right. So, what's a good suggestion to leave the listener with if we want to dabble and explore? Of course, we can go get the training, and you can promote how we connect with you. But if we're going to do a simple, basic exercise now after listening to this show to
Yeah.
kind of get us connected, what do you think would be a good idea?
May I answer that, Brad, in about 4 minutes? If I can do it, if I can answer that in 4 minutes, it'll be a full answer.
Here we go, people.
Okay, great. Time me. And it'll bring some other stuff that we've talked about into the conversation. That second sentence of the definition of the victim mentality. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process, even in the absence of clear, depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. Habitual thought process. So there are certain words that the victim mentality has to have. There are three in the enlifted vernacular. There's three pillars. Okay, there's projections, there's negations, and there's soft talk. We already talked about projections. The keywords are you, she, he, they, them, dad, mom, the government. I need you to respect me versus I need me to respect me, or he did that to me. No, I did
Mm.
that to me. Wow. Okay, that's different. Then there's negations. Negations force people to stare at the worst case scenario. I can't keep living like this. There's a picture of me living like this. I won't make that mistake again. There's a picture of me making that mistake again. So won't, can't, isn't, haven't, not, shouldn't. Those words, again, force us to stare at the stuff that scares us, whether we like it or not. And then here's the answer: soft talk. Soft talk. Here are the soft talk keywords. And soft talk is the easiest place for people to start thinking about their thinking, because there's
Mm.
only a handful of words, and all you got to do is take it out and you're going to feel it. And when someone feels the difference between I think I'm drinking too much coffee and I'm drinking too much coffee,
Mm.
or it's almost like I'm procrastinating versus I'm
Yeah.
procrastinating, or I guess I should have that conversation with them, or I should have that
Mm.
conversation with them. Think, should,
Mm.
could, maybe, kinda. I'm kinda overreacting. No, you are. Take out the kinda and own it. Okay. Hopefully, probably, possibly. One day I'd like to run a marathon. How about today? How about today you start training? Or one day I'd like to join a gym. How about today? What are you doing? You're gonna watch the news tonight? Go join a gym instead. You'll like the outcome better. Or try those words. If you start plucking them out, and on our website we've got a uh, handout that this is the top of the. I just got 1,000 of
Mm,
these things made. Soft Talk Challenge. I just went down to Texas and I handed out 1,500 of these things. I did 6 workshops and went on 3 podcasts and met with a bunch of people. And these are the words, everybody. You can get this exact handout on our website and no, excuse me, that's our IG, www.enlifted.me. It's got all the stuff about the certs on there. And go get this printed out and watch what happens. And you'll feel it. And when you feel it, you're like, man, that elementary school
mm,
teacher MMA fighter, he was serious about my words. I am. And I'm sincere. I promise you. If you take some of those words out of a text message, you're going to have
mm,
a better response.
mm,
If you take some of those words out of a conversation you're having about a big decision, you're going to make that decision faster and smoother, and you're going to like the way that feels.
mm,
And then from there, it's like, okay, well, what other words are causing me to talk myself out of loving myself or doing things that are important to me, or being a good listener, being a good father, being a good, you know, whatever it is. Because if you got a problem with something, there's very likely, it's an understatement, there's very likely
mhm,
some key words in there that you can change,
mm,
and other things will change.
mhm, mhm. You were showing on the video that list of words which we can download at enlifted.me, but it was the probably, sort of, shoulda, coulda, woulda, all that kind of stuff. So we're in the groove, people. Check your words. Try
It's
one
a good one.
day, maybe, could, possibly. So I'm going to try to remember as many of those as possible. Whoops, cross that one off. I'm going to memorize those words, man. Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps I'll make that long jump or no, I'm gonna
Yeah.
nail that.
Yeah.
Be your own
Yeah.
hype man. It'll
Right
help.
on. Right on. Mark England, everybody, bringing it from the Enlifted method. Please visit Enlifted, Enlifted.me. And that's the starting point. But of course, he gave us some nice miniature homework assignments. Thanks so much for spending the time, Mark, and keep up doing the great work.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me on. Thanks everybody for listening.
Da 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 da.